because the presentation of our former permanent representative to the United Nations is I've actually just set the tone for the discussions. But let me first of all invite very quickly Mr. David Ndegwa, Managing Director of Property Dynamics Kenya, to please come forward, share your experience with us, and perhaps, who knows, we could hit the ground running in partnership with you from today. Can we please welcome him to the podium with a resounding applause?
Thank you. The chairman, all protocols observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I am here today as a continuation of what we started a year ago with Pamsek, that is what I call him, because he's a good friend of mine and a brother. And we want to see how can we continue? How can we make this grow? You know, Simon said, you've taken a first step. Now this is the second step. How do we take the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the 1,000th? How do we keep growing? You know, of course, this morning we are talking about what is not working right and what Nigeria is struggling with, and that is housing. But I think it is also important to just remind you as a foreigner, as a Kenyan, of what you have done right, what we admire you for, what we know Nigeria for, so that if you know where you've come from, then you can believe in where you're going, and you can be able to achieve the dream that you have at hand. Well, a few of the things that we talk about in my home when you talk about Nigeria, other than your movies that have overtaken all our movies. And so if you find somebody watching a movie in Nairobi, it is not a Hollywood movie. It is an Nollywood movie, I can guarantee you for a fact. You know, other than the movies that teach us a lot about your culture and your way of doing things and how courageous and how brave Nigerians are, there are a few other things that you seem to forget that we don't as Kenyans or East Africans. You know, this country is the largest economy in Africa. You know, we seem to forget that. You know, when you're talking about what you haven't done and what you should do and what is left behind, what is lagging behind, you forget that this is the largest economy that this country has. So you have no choice. You must succeed for the rest of us to be able to follow. And if you don't, then the rest of us will catch up. So you must succeed. One of the other things is that Nigeria has the largest population. You know, that does not only show that you are healthy as a nation, it also shows that you have a lot of potential. You know, 185 million, maybe even bigger, is not a joke. It's not a small population to speak of. It means you can be able to achieve anything that you put your hand to. Besides this, it is the most educated population in Africa. So you had one gentleman with degrees that I lost count of. I doubt you can have somebody with that many degrees in Kenya. Femi knows this. I've had somebody here with 9 degrees before, and I was like, where did you get the life? You know, the time in your life to be able to do that many degrees. Did you have 2 lives or 3? How did you get 9 degrees? You know, this again is a testament to your dedication as far as your education sector is concerned. We do not want to forget that this country is best in sports. For the young people who have tried to play against your national team, then you know what I'm talking about. You know, again, if you put your mind to it and your heart to it, you do not only beat all Africans in football. I think you're the only team that has beaten Argentina, the only African team that has beaten Argentina in the past. You know, you beat national teams from established nations because you have put your heart to it. And then, of course, one of the other things that is left behind by many people that is not lost to us is that Nigeria has the 4th largest diaspora globally. If you count the number of Nigerians that live outside this country, it would shock you. I certainly, in my short life at 43 years of age, not gone to a country that I have not met a Nigerian. And a friend of mine told me the other day that if you go to any country in this globe and you do not find a Nigerian, please look around, because you're not in this world. You're in another world. You're in another planet. You know, is this a weakness? It is certainly not a weakness. Some of these countries have more money brought to their economy by their respective diasporians than some of their exports. Kenya certainly, I think the Kenyan diaspora now is the third largest foreign revenue earner for our country. The Kenyan diaspora. You know, I don't know if anybody has done statistics here, but I think the figures of money sent to Nigeria from the diaspora would be staggering. You know, so when you look at all those things that Nigeria has done well, and not just did well, but thrived, succeeded. What about housing? You know, when you look at it from that angle, then housing becomes a small issue. Why would we not succeed in housing the people of Nigeria? What would we not do? Why would we not succeed in doing that? You know, we had shipped some of your best brains, like Femi, to Nairobi to help us, and indeed, they helped us. We have Professor Banji. We have many Nigerian professionals that work in my country, you know, that I cannot even count. Now, some of them have come back here. Femi is back here again, trying to help his country rebuild itself, and in that particular sector. You know, so he's gone from building Africa, Shelter Africa, now to building Nigeria. Why can we not succeed? You know, so the question to you guys is, why can we not succeed? I'll give you just a few things that you may be able to do, and you can be able to hold on to some assets that you do not realize you have that could make it very easy for you to be able to succeed in this country in terms of housing your people. You know, so we have done it in Kenya. We are still doing it, but we have succeeded by and large further than other countries in Africa in terms of providing affordable housing. Now the government has made it its main agenda, so the government is fully involved and engaged in the provision of affordable housing in my country. But then there are other ways that we are doing it that is making it easy for the government to achieve that goal, and for us as a country to be able to achieve the goal of providing housing. Well, one of the areas that we are working with and that has made us succeed so much, because we cannot talk about all the areas here, but I'll talk about social capital. We will leave the other experts to talk about the other areas. We will talk a bit about social capital, because this is something that a lot of people do not realize they have. A lot of people do not realize the power of social capital. You know, social capital put together is basically, in simple terms, utilizing money that is in the pockets of a particular community or society for the benefit or the good of all the members of that community. You know, if you put the slides behind, I don't know if he has the slides ready. I was told here it's called Esusu. You know, because that's where it started in Nairobi. We call it Chama, where women and farmers come together and they contribute money every day, and that money is on a rotational basis, is given to one person. So what happens is it becomes the cheapest source of capital because it does not have interest attribute to it. So it is purely based on social well-being of the members in the group. So money is contributed by individual members of the group, and is given to one person. So with time, this grew in my country to an extent now, 1 out of every 4 families is supported by an Esusu, or money from an Esusu. 1 out of every 4 families. You know, because at some point in some villages, the men became drunkards. And so they drank so much, they forgot their families. But then Esusu members, or women that put themselves in a group, you know, I don't know why it succeeds more in Nairobi with women. I don't know if it is the same story here. But somebody told me the other day in Nairobi is because the men Esusus, or the men Chamas, meet in a bar. And so once they contribute all the money, then they have drunk more than they have contributed, and they have to pay the bill. And then the women meet in social settings. And so with time, this became very, very serious. And so they were able to form the SACCOs or cooperatives, what we commonly call SACCOs in my country. That is also here, talking to PAMSEC and talking to a few other people, I have realized that Nigeria indeed has very, very serious SACCOs. But now, what has happened with the SACCOs in Kenya? Over time, they became so serious, they became corporate, they became the largest SACCOs in Africa. So there is one place where Nairobi and Kenya has overtaken Nigeria. Why? And that's why I'm saying, if you do not keep growing, if you do not keep utilizing your resources, then others catch up. Is it that they started earlier than Nigerian? No. Nigerian economy, Nigerian SACCOs were started earlier, I think almost 10 years earlier than the Kenyan SACCOs. But over time, because they put their emphasis on it, they grew it, they developed it, the government put effort in growing the cooperatives in Kenya became the biggest in Africa. How big do you think these cooperatives became? How influential do you think they became in the Kenyan economy? You know, just to mention a few benefits, the cooperatives in Kenya have over 12 million members. How many do you think cooperatives would have in Nigeria if they put time to it, if they put their resources to it? We have 12 million members. All these are appraised members. I remember recently discussing with the government operatives, and I asked them when they wanted to do a Marshall Plan for their housing program, I told them to show me 1 million buyers, 1 million well-appraised buyers of houses from the civil service. And the truth is, they do not even have a good record. A lot of them are ghost workers. So I said, I can show you 12 million home buyers from cooperatives, and all of them are very well known. We know how many of them are women, we know how many of them are men, we know how many of them earn above a certain category, we know how many of them are young, how many of them are youth. You know, all these are members that anybody or any financial institution can be able to use to grow as a platform to develop any product that they want to develop. Do you know how much money they have saved in commercial banks? Would you guess? The Kenyan banks, the Kenyan cooperatives, as of last month, had put together 1 trillion Kenya shillings in liquid cash with the commercial banks. So 1 trillion Kenya shillings, of course, is hard for you to convert to Naira and then to dollars and then back to understand. But I'll do that for you. It is $10 billion worth of commercial money, social capital, patient money that has been put together in liquid cash in the commercial banks. What do the commercial banks do with this money? Femi, you tell us, but they do what commercial banks do best, which is to lend at a higher interest rate, even back to the same cooperatives, and then make huge profit out of it. But now the cooperatives are starting to claw back and use some of this money to finance mortgages, to fund housing, to fund other products for their members. The mortgage situation in Kenya is not any better than the mortgage situation here. The mortgage statistics for last year, and I think this year, is about 24,000 mortgages successfully delivered to the citizenry. I think here the last I checked was 30-something thousand mortgages successfully delivered by commercial banks to their members. You know, a friend of mine, when I was making this presentation in Europe, told me never to mention that again. And I said, why? And they said, because it's immoral. You cannot be talking about a country, in Kenya, for example, 45 million people, population, and 24,000 mortgages. Now, I do not want to mention the figures in Nigeria, unless I say it quietly to your ear. Because you have 185 million people. You know, you cannot be talking about those low levels of mortgages. It shows something is not right. So we may be doing it right in terms of sports, we may be doing it right in terms of other things, petroleum production and other things. We may be doing it right in terms of other areas, but we are certainly not doing it right as far as housing is concerned. So can social capital help? With the statistics that I have given you, social capital can indeed help. One of the guys that I was talking to, describing social capital, said it is predicted or predicated on a platform of a few who work together can achieve more than many who strive alone. Few who work together, even just a few of you, 10, 20 of you working together, you can achieve more than many who strive alone. So one person striving alone and you count them and they are 100. 5 people working together can achieve more than 100 people, each working alone or striving alone. Another statement that I have had very close to this is, if you want to go far, or if you want to walk far, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to go far, walk with others. So in Kenya, we have proven this to be true. So all people around the world are coming to Kenya to find out, how did these circles work? So while the cooperatives came together so that they can be able to micro-lend to each other, they have achieved other things that they were not even planning in the very beginning. So eradication of poverty, because it's very hard to find these 12 million members of circles being referred to as poor. They are no longer poor. Why are they not poor? Because if only one of you in a group has money, can the other person call himself poor? Because your money in a group becomes mine. My money in a group becomes yours. So we can lift ourselves out of poverty. And certainly, housing is an area that they have gotten into that is helping these organizations work together so well. So one of the other things that I want, or perhaps to drive this point home, maybe is to give you a small story that I gave it last time, and I can repeat it now. We called it Acres of Diamonds, if you can remember. And if you can go to the page that shows an old man, if you have the slides, or maybe they are missing, so I'll just talk about it. So this is an acre told, a story told of a man that owned 100 acres of land in South Africa. Many years ago, I wasn't born, but I became a recipient of this story. And this old man, his land was barren, so he spent a lot of time going around his land. His children had grown up and gone. He'd been suffering of poverty and a lot of issues. And he was tired, and he thought, I am going to die in this land because I cannot grow anything, because this land is just barren. Every time I walk from one corner to the other, I just see pieces of stones and small shrubs. It's really a barren piece of land. I cannot be able to help myself. I cannot help anybody with this piece of land. And then there were stories that were simmering through that some places in South Africa they had found diamonds. And everybody who laid their hands on that stone called a diamond became a wealthy man instantly. And so this old man decided to sell his land for the little money that he could get, pack his belongings, and go down south to go and look for diamonds. And so, as the story goes, he sold his land for peanuts. In Nairobi, we say if you sold your land for nothing, then you have sold it for peanuts. So he sold his land for peanuts. And sure enough, packed his belongings, went down south to look for gold and diamonds that had been found. And so he was looking for this gold and diamond everywhere. And what happened? Did he find the gold and the diamonds? As the story goes, because of his age, he couldn't even dig with a shovel anywhere. And so with time, he died a broken man, and he had nothing to show for it. So the gentleman that bought his land was looking at it every day and wondering, what can I do with it? Can I reclaim it? Can I dig a borehole, perhaps, and find some water? Can I fence it? Can I put some wildlife? Can I grow some plants, maybe that grow in the desert? So every day he's walking around this 100-acre piece of land, and he comes across a shimmering stone one morning. And so from the smiles on your faces, I can tell you know the end of this story. So the shimmering stone was eventually found or discovered to be a diamond. And so the guy realized that there is some assets on this piece of land, and he went to the experts. They were able to strike a deal, and it became, at that time, one of the largest sources of diamonds in South Africa. And so that man became a success. He became a wealthy man. What happened to the real owner of the land? He died poor. So what is the moral of the story? You sometimes can spend your entire life looking for what is just in your hands. You can go around everywhere, looking and looking and looking, and what you are really looking for is just in your hands. I have seen that across this continent. And we spend a lot of time looking for things. You know, sometimes I hear people coming to Nairobi, foreigners coming to give us money, donor funding, everybody coming, and then the citizenry now starts talking about donor funding. Until we get to a point where we are so over-dependent on this donor funding, we are waiting for it to an extent that now it starts feeding us. And then when you ask these guys what they are doing in Africa, and they tell you what they are doing in Africa and how much money they are making from Africa, from our resources, from our education, from our knowledge, from our organization, from our land, you get shocked. You know, some of these statistics, I wouldn't even say them publicly, otherwise they'll become political. But they are shocking. You know, in a country like this, when you look at social capital, what we call social capital, you know, money that is in the hands and pockets of the many Nigerians that live in this country, sometimes it can surprise you. You know, when we were talking with Femi earlier, I was saying, I just cannot understand the obsession that we have with the debt, with loan. You know, from the time we are young and we clear school, you know, in my country, they start borrowing their educational money. They finish with their educational money, they finish with school, they go to jobs and they start borrowing small loans. And, you know, by the time a guy is 60, 70, he's still borrowing. So I do not know whether we blame the banks because of just shoving this on our faces, debt, 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 or do we blame our mentality? But that is really just the thinking that we have. That you cannot own a home, you cannot buy a house, you cannot get into this investment without first going to the bank. And sometimes we forget that banks are not necessarily, and we know we have bankers here, and some of these things will not make them happy, but banks are not necessarily the best of our friends. You know, we have to go to the banks when we have generated something ourselves. One of the questions that the bankers would ask you is, do you have collateral? In my country, they ask you, do you have bank statements for the last 6 months? You know, sometimes I ask myself, if I had a house or collateral, would I be coming to you to ask for money? You know, it simply does not make sense. And one of the things that I have seen, you know, Kenyans doing is queuing in these banks to be able to borrow money at very high interest rates. Some of the people that I asked, did you get the offer letter? They're like, yes, yes, yes. It is like you won some lottery just because you got an offer letter. Did you sign it? Yes, yes, yes. I signed it at the bank and left it with the banker. So he never even had time to go through the paperwork to see what does the bank say. Some of the things that the bank say in some of those contracts is the punitive interest if you do not pay, that normally double or triple when you are supposed to pay on the 4th and you pay on the 5th. So you find people, age of my fathers, who have been paying loans for so many years and have never really become wealthy. And the number of people that have lost their assets and property and things in Kenya, I mean, it's astounding. It's shocking. So I always say, why is it that as Africans, we want first to jump to the bank and borrow money? Of course, banks in Europe and other places work differently. I have seen banks in Europe asking you for your business plan. How does your business plan look like? You know, sit here and talk to the committee and tell us how your business plan looks like. I've seen banks in Europe asking for your credit history. You know, what is your credit worthy like? You know, are you somebody that can be trusted? And that you can find by digging deep into the history of this guy when they went to school and the rest. And I have seen banks in Europe giving people money who did not own a bank account. You know, because once the banks, the business plan makes sense, the survey and the business survey makes sense, the individual is a credible individual, then the bank can take a bit of risk in getting involved in that business with you. In Africa, I don't know, the DNA of our banks is different. And so you see people really suffering. So the question I was asking earlier is, you know, do you think Nigeria as a country has enough social capital? Do you think you can be able to put people together in cooperatives and circles that can be able to lend the government of Nigeria money? Is it possible? You know, in our country, now the cooperatives can lend the government money. We have enough money to give the government for some of these social issues that they have. You know, some of the cooperatives now own a few banks. So the cooperatives are coming together and they are buying the banks. So they are telling them, we don't like the way you are lending us money. We will buy this institution of yours and lend ourselves money. Do you think Nigeria has capacity to do that? So somebody says yes, and I agree with you. You know, when I was seated in my hotel room, I was going through some documentation and discussing with a friend of mine, Francis, seated right there. You know, and Francis was telling me a very interesting story that we came across in your news of this group called MMM, Mavrodi Module Money Box. I don't know if you have heard of it. Triple M. How many of you have heard of MMM? So that I'm not. See, so is everybody here has heard of MMM? Femi, I'm not sure you have heard it. You just came recently. You are a foreigner like me. So, but MMM, Femi, incidentally, was telling, you know, the poor Nigerians, put in a little bit of money here, we can invest together and we can give you a bit of. So it ended up basically becoming like a Ponzi scheme. But what was staggering, what was shocking to me is, you know, when I was reading some of your dailies, like this one saying Vanguard, it says how Nigerians invested over 28.7 billion naira and lost it in crashed MMM. You know, so when you think about it, so I asked Francis, how long has this MMM been in operation? How long have they existed? And Femi, this would shock you. In 6 months. So what did you call the money that MMM stole and took back to Russia? Debt? What did you call it? Equity? This is social capital from Nigerians. Can you imagine if the cooperatives in this country had come together and decided to call the Nigerians and raise the small money that they have in their pockets? So by the time they go to FEMI and go to the banks to borrow money, they have their own money. Can you imagine how different things would be? Can you imagine if all this amount of money was seated with a cooperative or an organization somewhere? You know, this would really change the housing sector in this country. That amount of money was only stolen, again doing the calculations with Francis, from just roughly about 2 million Nigerians. So 2 million Nigerians in 6 months raised how much? 28.7 billion naira. So how much more would a lot more Nigerians raise if they came together as cooperatives and put it together for social housing sector? So, you know, to cut the long story short, because I don't have so much time, you have more social capital. And I think this country has more social capital than any other country on the African continent. You just need to stop looking for your diamonds everywhere in the world and start looking for it from. Just walk around from your pieces of land and see what you can be able to get. Last time also somebody mentioned that one of the problems is land. And I hear this problem again and again, that we have no land, we have so much issues. Maybe there is a little bit of land policy issues. But, you know, I am shocked when people say that Nigeria has no land. Certainly I thought that there is no land when I was coming from Nairobi, because how do 185 million people look like? You know, you tell me, because I didn't know. How do 185 million people seated in one country look like? So I thought, if I land, you know, the plane will probably be looking for a place to perch itself, because there are so many people, just a country seething with population. And I was shocked. You know, when the plane was landing, I was just looking down and I'm seeing all these patches of land that have no one. And when the plane landed, and just like last time, again I was taking a bit of time to look on both sides of the road, I found no houses until I got to near Yemi's house. You know, so the place is just full of land. So it's not really about land. It is about us sitting together, working on our products, working on our business plan, working on the arrangement, studying this whole issue of housing, understanding it very, very well, getting the experts to be able to do it so that we can finally do it. One of the things that I have seen just now as I conclude is as we talk about Niche and Niche's ability to be able to turn this around, is to familiarize yourself with the risks that are associated with real estate. And those ones would include finance that we have tackled here, but there are others, other than just finance. You have a product risk. You have your pricing risk. Because a lot of us, Africa, we price houses from our stomachs going up. You know, we first ask ourselves, how much money do I want as profit? And then we start loading everything else as margins. And eventually we outprice ourselves out of the market. Then there are legal issues. You know, how do we go about these legal issues to make sure that the land is done? One thing I want to say